minutes to join and we'll get started. Hi everyone, I'm Kelli Harran, and I think I'm going to start by introducing myself. I know folks are still trickling in, but we'll go ahead and get started. So I am a lifelong Montessorian. I was a Montessori child myself, started when I was not quite 3 years old in a children's house or primary classroom, and went all the way through upper elementary before transitioning to a traditional middle school. And my childhood experience inspired me to take the Montessori elementary training, and so I have spent the last decade in the classroom before joining Higher Ground and Guidepost Montessori. So whether you live and breathe Montessori or you are not as familiar and you may be thinking to yourself, Monta what? Not to worry, you've come to the right place and we welcome you. Just a couple of housekeeping items. We're going to be recording this webinar, so just wanted you to know that ahead of time. And if you have any questions as I'm talking, my colleague Emily will be gathering them and sending them my way. And you can send them through the chat feature under questions in the panel. Everyone, see if you can try to find that right now. And let's go ahead and test it. If you can let us know what state you're joining from. So we've got some folks from Virginia and New York. Who else? California, Texas. All right, great. Washington, DC, got a great variety. Pennsylvania, awesome. All right. So I wanted to start out by previewing what I'm going to talk about today, just so that you know what to expect. I know that we're all in different places in our Montessori journey, so in order to ground us, I'll start by talking about who Montessori was and why she was so pioneering. I'm going to touch on Montessori's theory of development and some basic principles to give just some broad brushstrokes, and then we'll get into an overview of the different developmental stages. And then we'll get into the meaty stuff with the top 5 misconceptions. It was obviously hard to choose only 5, but these are some that come up frequently, so I thought it would be a good place to start. And then finally, I wanted to give a little context around Guidepost Montessori, who's sponsoring this series. We're an international network of Montessori schools. And then I'm going to preview some of our upcoming webinars, and of course there'll be time for questions at the end. All right, great. So Montessori was one of the first female Italian physicians. She came from a scientific background, which undergirds her approach. Montessori was born 150 years ago, so there's a big celebration of her legacy this year. And her pioneering method of education is based on careful scientific observation. The educational materials that she developed and selected have withstood the test of time. They were chosen because she observed what children were drawn to and were benefiting from. Sometimes people think of Montessori as a little bit airy-fairy, but that couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually deeply scientific. Before Montessori became an educational reformer, she worked in a psychiatric clinic for children who were mentally ill or had intellectual disabilities. So she had that background when she began overseeing the care and education of a group of children from disadvantaged backgrounds who lived in a housing project in Rome. And that became the first children's house, or Casa dei Bambini. So she started out serving many children with special needs, and her methods were then applied to more typically developing children and also found to produce remarkable outcomes. In 1909, she launched her first teacher training course, and over the next decade, her training and methods spread far and wide and was embraced by an international community. So she published her findings in the Montessori Method, which was a bestseller translated into 10 languages within 3 years. And when it was translated into English, it sold out in 4 days. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 3 times for her committed efforts on behalf of children and educational reform. One of the basic underpinnings of Montessori theory is that children, adolescents, and young adults go through developmental stages that she called the 4 planes of development. So they span from birth to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, and 18 to 24. Each of those is subdivided into 3-year groupings, which make up our mixed age classrooms. Independence permeates the approach. For young children, that means physical independence, and for older children, that's intellectual independence. Instead of being teacher-centered, Montessori is child-centered. It's individualized to each child. A hallmark is the prepared environment where children are surrounded by beauty, order, and simplicity, hands-on curated learning materials, and an adult, the teacher or the guide, that connects the child to the objects in the environment where they can freely choose to repeat and absorb knowledge from these experiences. Montessori offers children the ability to make choices and to follow developmental urges, and for older children to pursue their research passions. In our infant classrooms, children move unimpeded to help develop their coordination. Older children aren't confined to desks, but they can choose a seating area that suits the kind of work that they are doing and who they are collaborating with. So I'm featuring here a comparison of 2 developmental stages of childhood, although this of course extends into adolescence and young adulthood. So we have the absorbent mind, which is also the title of a Montessori book. And during this stage, children are collecting impressions effortlessly in the environment, whereas the older child, in developing their reasoning mind, is developing their intellect and the ability to use logic. The young child experiences the world through their senses and physical objects and learning the names for everything. The older child, of course, takes that further and begins to refine the use of language and to discuss more sophisticated, abstract ideas. In early childhood, we have the motto, "Help me do it myself," or as the children say, "Me do it." So in our Montessori early childhood classrooms, we have guides that are giving lessons one-on-one individually to children. And children are often doing their work by themselves or in parallel with others. Whereas by the time they get to elementary, they're driven by this social urge, and so the work is much more collaborative, right? And again, we've got this physical independence versus intellectual independence happening. Where things are placed in the environment and the sequence is very important, especially in early childhood, because they're developing that sense of internal order, which is mirrored outside. Whereas in elementary, the child is organizing and classifying and finding patterns and information. So the environment is still very important, but that organization is happening internally. The young child operates in the here and the now, whereas the older child has the ability to appreciate people they have never met across the globe and people from ancient civilizations. The young child is at this identifying stage, right? They want to know, what is the light? What is the chair? Whereas the older child wants to know, how does electricity work and when was it invented? And then lastly, the young child wants to understand what's around them, right? What makes one thing different from the next? How can they express themselves and what they want and why they're frustrated? How to get from here to there through their own efforts. Whereas the older child wants to know, what does it mean to be part of this culture in this nation and this era? What are the rules of etiquette and grammar and physics? And how can they use their minds to problem solve things that they've never encountered before? So at every level, learning is an engaging process. It's not the drudgery that so many people associate with traditional school or webinars. Just kidding. We've got mixed age classrooms. So our children's house, for example, is ages 3 to 6. You've got lower elementary, that's 6 to 9. Sometimes elementary extends and we group our 6 to 12-year-olds together. And this resembles a workplace, right? Like not everyone I work with is 38. We give children the gift of time so that they're able to engage deeply and to practice concentration, and opportunities to exercise and nurture independence. They have access to manipulatives that give children tactile learning experiences. And through repetition, children have the opportunity to do something to their satisfaction to achieve mastery. The guide connects children to the classroom environment and helps to guide them through each lesson in the sequence. So let's look a little at each level. So these same principles can also be applied at home, although I'm going to be talking about them like in terms of the classroom. So nido in Italian means nest, and that evokes a certain kind of warmth and security. Infants in this environment feel cared for and loved and therefore safe to explore. So they're building their gross motor skills. So what you won't see in one of our Montessori nido environments are playpens or jumpers or walkers or high chairs, because we know that children need to move, right? They need the space to move and to crawl. Montessori famously said that the hand is the instrument of intelligence. So the baby is learning how to grasp objects, and we offer them increasingly complex objects to explore and bars to pull up on. Once they're able to hold their own bottle, we invite them to do that. And then they'll transition eventually to drinking from a tiny glass. The guide observes the rhythms of their feeding and sleeping and biological functions and honors that. The child can take the lead by crawling to a napping space when they're tired, rather than being placed in a crib. And they can self-feed when they're hungry. It's vital to expose them to rich vocabulary and meaningful interaction. So we're always talking to them and explaining what we're doing, even when we're doing something that might seem mundane, like changing a diaper. And here are some of our nido Guidepost Montessori environments. All right, let's dive into the toddlers. So we know this is a time of dramatic advancement of fine and gross motor skills. So we want to offer them lots of opportunities to exercise that both inside and outside, and activities to feed their developing minds. Children at this age are going from, uttering two-word phrases into full sentences, and we want to support that language development through systematic vocabulary building and beautifully illustrated books and songs and poetry, all of that. And of course, we have furniture that's sized to fit their small stature. So you can see that the tables and the chairs and the sink, which you can't see in this image, are all sized to the children. And they're offered purposeful, challenging, real work, like window washing and caring for plants. Toilet learning is, of course, really big work for this stage of life. So they've probably been participating, if they've been in the environment, in the process of stand-up diapering. But once they show some signs of readiness, they're encouraged to use the toilets that are right-sized in a really positive, relaxed, supporting environment. And rather than correcting behavior, we show them what to do. So a child can see, for example, where items go on a place setting. And you can see that even a little better here. All right, children's house. So we have our 3 to 6-year-olds grouped together and lots of opportunities for peer learning. The oldest children in the class can help acclimate the younger children and help preview their learning. And you've got a deepening of the attention span with this uninterrupted work time. Lots of practical life, more advanced than what you saw in the toddlers, with the toddlers, such as dishwashing and preparing food and mopping and flower arranging, with many more sequential steps that are involved. And lots of activities that encourage them to compare and contrast and to order items in a sequence, to highlight mathematical relationships. In our children's house, our children are learning their sounds and letter forms through tactile materials and lots of oral language exercises. And children actually learn how to write before reading and have often fully exploded into both before they even enter elementary. And of course, we've got exposure to the basics of the decimal system. Children, by the time they leave children's house, generally have experience with the 4 operations and are developing a really solid number sense. And here are some of our beautiful children's house environments. When I taught elementary, I would sometimes go down to the children's house just for a breath of fresh air because it seemed so orderly compared to the elementary children, which didn't have that same sense of order. All right, my people, elementary. So as I mentioned before, elementary is often grouped into lower elementary and upper elementary, but sometimes you'll see both combined. And this is an academically rich environment. So you've got language, literature, grammar, math, geometry, geography, history, science, botany, zoology, art, music. I'm sure I've missed something. And lessons at this age are done in small groups because, as we talked about before, the social needs are highlighted at that age. And along with that socialization urge, children often do follow-up and project-based work together. There are opportunities for children to mentor one another and sometimes even to teach. They're organizing events at this age, class-wide, school-wide, sometimes out in the community. And they're caring for the classroom through community jobs and keeping a work record of what they're doing and lessons that they're receiving, and conferencing one-on-one with their guides. And this, of course, develops executive functioning skills, the ability to juggle multiple deadlines and to create and meet goals. They're able to pursue their research interests through projects and operate in these designated roles and groups that they form. And they're doing this work over weeks and months. And they also have the opportunity to plan excursions, which is a little bit different than a field trip because the children are initiating, planning, and executing the trip. It could just be one child or a small group, but not the whole class. So they might go to, say, a museum or a university to consult an expert. And they do this to extend the work of the classroom or to pursue an interest rather than going on a teacher-organized field trip. The children really have ownership of this process. All right, so as promised, let's look at these elementary environments. I don't want to skip over that. I think one of these is at our Guidepost Montessori at Prosperity, and the other is Guidepost Montessori at Foothill Ranch in California. All right, top 5 Montessori myths busted. So this might be fodder for chatting with other parents at the park. You might hear like, oh, your kids go to Montessori. Isn't that where kids can do whatever they want? No. All right, myth number 1, Montessori is too unstructured. I bet some of you have heard this before. So if you're used to rows of desks and a teacher at the front, that may at first glance appear unstructured. And this probably also stems from the fact that children can choose their own work. But let's look at this a little bit more deeply. So they're doing this within a carefully planned structure of developmentally appropriate, challenging materials. So yes, they're offered this freedom, but within limits. The lessons themselves are highly structured and sequential. And so when children are using the material on their own, especially in early childhood, there's often a control of error element in it, which will show the child that they're doing something not quite right so they can self-correct. And materials are also stored in a very specific way. So again, that external order leading to internal order like we talked about earlier, particularly for the youngest children. And they can't choose an activity unless they're shown how to do it. So they're not just doing things willy-nilly as it strikes them. So it's actually because of the structure of the classroom that much more freedom is possible for children. And we have routines as well, right? We have work time and lunch and playtime, a time really for everything. It's just that the teacher isn't choreographing every minute of the day. And there are rules, despite the popular belief there. And they really boil down to, in most classrooms, being respectful of others, being respectful of yourself, and being respectful of the environment. And that pretty much covers all facets of the classroom. And then on the flip side, sometimes we hear that Montessori is too rigid. So if you walk into a room full of young children and they're calmly and quietly concentrating, that might be a little disconcerting if you've never seen it before. And you might even wonder, are they being stifled? But what's happening, of course, is that they're experiencing the deep satisfaction of being fully immersed and focused. Montessori spoke of following the child, which is rather the opposite of rigidity. Guides closely observe the children, they identify their interests, where their challenges lie, and what might suit each particular child, so they can see where in the structure the child is. There are rules, right? Like children can't disrupt other children who are working and must respect other people's spaces and concentration. But the result of that is that children can relax, knowing that they can deeply engage. And there are many well-known entrepreneurs and creative types who went to Montessori school. So clearly this is an approach that supports creativity. You have Jeff Bezos and the Google founders, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the writer, and Julia Child. Many of them credit their Montessori experience with providing the foundation that allowed them to pursue innovative paths. All right, next up is Montessori is just for preschoolers. Obviously, that's not the case because we have thriving elementary and adolescent programs. The benefits of Montessori really continue to multiply as you stay with the program. The approach continues to be thoughtful and methodical about meeting developmental needs at each stage of life, as you can see in some of the deep dives that we did at each level. And Montessori offers children a profoundly rich academic experience while also fostering life skills, including social and emotional awareness. So this support of the whole child is not inherent in traditional learning models. All right, myth number 4. Montessori doesn't prepare children for real school. Oh boy, okay. So parents who loved the safety and security of Montessori for their young child, they might wonder sometimes, and that's totally fair. So they might wonder if it will adequately prepare their older child for the rigors of middle school and college prep and testing and the quote unquote real world. And the good news is, yes, it does that exceptionally well, right? It builds attention at each level. So, you know, as a baby, your child's attention span may only last moments. And in a Montessori toddler program, children's attention span can grow up to an hour. In the children's house, a child may work on something for the entire morning, sometimes even a day or a week. And in elementary, as I mentioned, they can get engaged in projects that take weeks or months even to complete and often involve collaborators. So they're having to track their work and set goals. And all of this is critical to the development of executive functioning. So that's the skill set that allows people to juggle and prioritize tasks and to stay organized, regulate their impulses, be flexible, plan ahead, all of those great things. And there's a tremendous body of research on the importance of executive functioning in childhood and its link to success in adulthood. And this is something that Montessori does really well. All right, myth number 5. Montessori only works for certain children. I don't know where this comes from. Montessori meets children exactly where they are. So it could easily serve a child who, let's say, might be identified as gifted in a traditional setting. Children can move at an accelerated pace if that is their need because they aren't working in lockstep with other children. And also because of the mixed ages, children can be grouped in lessons according to the challenge that they're ready for, rather than by age. And remember, Montessori first developed her method when she was working with children who had special needs. So if a child needs greater repetition or space to work at a slower pace, Montessori has the flexibility to offer that as well. Take a high energy child. Well, there's gross motor movement that's inherent in our practical life areas. And purposeful movement is incorporated at each level, right? Children aren't confined to a desk, they can move around. And yes, there are some situations where children may need extra support. They might need tutoring or therapies outside of school for particular needs, but that's not at all incompatible with Montessori. Montessori is individualized education at its finest, and there are all kinds of learning styles and intelligences that are honored and served. So I want to shift for a moment to tell you a bit about Guidepost Montessori and our network. We're in multiple states across the country, and we're also expanding internationally into Asia and Europe and Canada. A few of these schools have actually not yet opened, but are in process, and we are accepting enrollment. We also extend into middle and high school, and that's the Academy of Thought and Industry, that logo there on the top left. And we are also launching an exciting new Nanny Share initiative that's piloting in New York right now, and it's going to expand from there. And you can learn more about it at guidepostathome.com. So what sets Guidepost apart? What are we all about? Well, we follow Dr. Montessori's original approach. We're committed to high quality, high fidelity Montessori. And our classrooms are outfitted with state-of-the-art materials. They're complete to offer the full benefit to children. And in our toddler and children's house classrooms, we offer a rich selection of real-world activities that promote concentration and logical thinking. And for our teachers, we support them. They have access to the Prepared Montessorian for training and for continuing education. And we've got a whole programs team to back them up as well, to help nurture and support teachers who are in their practice and ensure that classrooms are meeting standards. And we really deeply value our partnership with parents. We care a lot about that, and we want to earn their trust. We want to make ourselves accessible and to offer all-inclusive pricing for our extended care that working parents need. I want to give a little plug here about our upcoming webinars. We've got one next week, actually, on Thursday, and you're in for a treat with Dr. Matt Bateman, who will be delving into Montessori relevant research in a very accessible way. And at the end of next month, let's see, let me advance that slide there, there we go. You can learn tips for creating inviting home spaces for babies and toddlers with Laura Kalama. And in March, you'll have the opportunity to hear more about how to create practical life opportunities for your toddlers at home and what a transition to school might look like. And there are going to be two that are coming up in April. So the first is a deep dive into ages 3 to 6 and what you can do to supplement at home. And then finally, we've got this great title here, Meltdowns, Tantrums, and Whining. Oh my, great topic on helping your child handle some of those big feelings. So if you're interested in touring one of our schools, please visit guidepostmontessori.com. And if we run out of time or if you have follow-up questions, please reach out. Our email is community@twohigherground.com. So I'm gonna turn my my camera back on and take a look at some of the questions that we have. Let's see, my mouse isn't cooperating here. There, I think we've got it. So I've had a couple of questions ahead of time that I wanted to respond to. One of them was about recommended books, and I do have a few, a bit of a mix here, and I can share them with you. I've got Montessori Today by Paula Polk Lillard. This is a great parent resource. Another one that I love is Montessori Madness, Trevor Eisler. And then if you want to read an original text, there are lots to choose from, but I think a good starter one is The Absorbent Mind. This is a really, really old copy. They're much nicer looking ones that are out in print now. And if you have more of a scientific bent, one that I love, it's thick, but it's really accessible, is Montessori, The Science Behind the Genius. And let's see, some other ones that I was sent in advance. I was asked how to create a Montessori environment for a 1.5-year-old and a question about toilet independence and positive discipline. And so I'd really recommend actually that you tune in to some of our upcoming webinars, because we have some early childhood experts to weigh in on exactly those topics. So another plug for that. And if you want to know how to register, you can go to our Guidepost Facebook page and you'll see invites to all of the webinars there. And also on the Guidepost Montessori blog page, there's a webinar series post, and you can use that to sign up directly for any of our upcoming webinars. So for creating a Montessori environment, I recommend Laura's webinar on February 25th. She can really give the best answer for that. And for questions about toilet independence, Ellie is going to be your person. She'll be addressing that and more. And on April 29th, Lisa Kathleen, who has a background in positive discipline, she's going to be your best source for those more specific questions. I had also one about ideas for Montessori-inspired activities at home that would help stimulate creativity and foster independence. And I recommend downloading, we have a fantastic resource if you don't know about it, the Guidepost Parent app, and you actually don't have to be a Guidepost parent to use it. And you can tailor it to the age level of your interest, and it's a great resource. You'll get things on your phone, tips and activities to try at home with your children. And I'm going to check in with Emily to see what questions are coming up. So let's see. There was a question about what are the large chairs that are in the photos. Those I'd have to go back and look, but are likely observation chairs or perhaps a chair for the adult in the environment. Yeah, that's probably what that is. And it says, oh, asked if I will be sharing a recording of the webinar afterwards. Yes, I will. I think we're likely going to wait until the series is over, but we'll be sure to share those out for folks that weren't able to make it today. And let's see, another question about Montessori high schools. Yes, there are Montessori high schools. We have, as I mentioned, the Academy of Thought and Industry in a number of different cities. I think we've got San Francisco, St. Louis. I think we have one in Austin. I think I'm forgetting a few, but you can go to our website and find out all the locations. How do I know if a Montessori school is coming to my state? Well, you can actually go to our Guidepost website. We have schools that are already opened, and we have some that will be coming soon, and you can scan that and see if they're at your state. You can also email community@twohigherground.com, and we can let you know if there are any that it might be in the pipeline. Or if you have like a group of parents that are really inspired, you don't have Montessori in your area, but you're interested in getting something started, you know, please reach out to us and we can discuss possibilities. We'd love to hear from you. All right, another question. Do you offer financial assistance? I really want my student to attend, but I'm not sure I can afford it. Yes, we do. We have financial aid at Guidepost. So we have a process through which you apply and share the paperwork that's needed. And yeah, that's in place. So please apply. Don't let that be a stopper. See if there are any other questions. It says, my student speaks Spanish. I think there might be a second part to this question. Gonna just wait. So yes, so we offer, we have some language immersion classes in our children's house environments and some dual language in some of our elementary environments. So it really depends on where you are. There are also, in many schools, we have offerings an extended day for different language clubs. And also, you know, if that's something that your community is interested in, that's something that we may be able to provide if there's enough demand for it. So it looks like that might be all the questions that we have for now, but if anything comes up, again, please feel free to email community@twohigherground.com. We'll be sending an email afterwards so that you can sign up for some of the other webinars. And it was so lovely having you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I think we're ready to wrap up.